Welcome to Humanity Rising. I'm Tom Eddington. Delighted to have you with us again today for day 8 of our 2-week series on When Peace Was a Secret. Today we're going to be focusing on the environment and habitat. And as we have shared throughout the past 7 days, we're working our way around the peace wheel that was something created by Avon Madison and the folks at Pathways for Peace. And it's been a wonderful journey as we've traveled the peace wheel, landing today on the role that the environment and habitat has to play in supporting world peace. And just to share some of my opening comments, I'd like to start with President Joe Biden was at the UN yesterday, and just reflecting on his 50 years in public service and what he's witnessed during that time. And I think it's a helpful backdrop for this conversation today, where in his opening remarks and comments at the UN, he spoke about all the forces that have pulled our countries apart over the last 50 years: aggression, extremism, chaos, and cynicism, while at the same, which certainly has supported world leaders and countries wanting to retreat from the world and try to go it alone. And he shared that our task, or really our test, is to make sure that the forces holding us together are stronger than those that are pulling us apart. That the principles of partnership that we came here each year at the UN to uphold can withstand the challenges that the center holds once again. And we've certainly spoken about that over the last week and a half, that as a species, we're hardwired for collaboration and cooperation. He went on to talk about, and when he stepped into the role of president, his primary focus was on preserving democracy as the central cause of his presidency and some of the difficulties he's faced. He went on to speak about all of the things that have challenged humanity in his 50 years in public service. But what he shared was that every time we face these challenges, he referenced as a young man, he sees it today, that in the words of Nelson Mandela, we're stronger together than alone. And as Mandela said, and what the people can call impossible is just an illusion. It always seems impossible until it's done. And that's certainly been our message over the last week and a half about how we can change the narrative on how humanity views the state of the world. That in fact, the vast majority of the 8 billion people on the planet live on a daily basis in some level of peace, and that we could have world peace and the narrative could change in a nanosecond. And so our focus has very much been on peace literacy over the last week and a half, and we'll continue that conversation today. I think a second message I'd like to share is I was reading an article written by Louis Rosenberg, a researcher and academician and founder of multiple companies, talking about, have we reached peak humanity? And how could we use artificial intelligence? And he referenced that AI now has the capability to outscore most human beings on an IQ test. But he goes on to talk about a term he calls collective superintelligence, where maybe AI has the ability to outperform a human being. But in fact, if a group of people using AI, a group of human beings come together in their collective superintelligence, that there is the potential to greatly amplify humanity's cognitive abilities. And unlike the intelligence of AI, we are inherently able to, because of our instilled values, morals, sensibilities, and interest, we can use AI for the benefit of humanity in solving some of our biggest problems, some of our biggest challenges. So with those opening comments, I'd like to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Marilyn King, for some opening remarks before we invite our guest into today's session.
Wow, Tom, what a great day. And building on, President Biden and, in his closing remarks about who we are together and what we're capable of. And, Nelson Mandela, about, what people think is impossible until it's done. That's the world I come from. And I am very excited about you and I have been playfully shifting the name of this series from When Peace Was a Secret to When Peace Was No Longer a Secret. And for me, it just takes me off the charts. Because when people know what I know and can see what I see, you'll wake up as excited as I am to be part of what is emergent on the planet. So I want to start by sharing with those of you gathered here and those who will be listening in a recording that I talk to my friends about how we all need to up our game. We really can make it as a planet and a species, but up our game doesn't mean that we can work harder. It means that we get to work smarter. And I found out a few days ago, there's actually an AI, platform or program that you can provide a foundation for of your values so that everything that you get back is filtered through those values in terms of what's possible. So when I talk about this, I know that upping my game means that I have to be bolder. And I've been someone who has been reluctant to speak my truth because what I would get back was like, yeah, right, good luck with that. And so I would choose not to speak, and I can't do that anymore. So what I want to do is just, with just a few brief opening remarks, just share with you that my contribution right now on the planet and to this program is based on what I call or consider, some essential truths. And, I was just a B+ athlete. Yes, I'm an Olympian, but I was just a B+ athlete and not destined to be an Olympian until I was seized by this thought. And in that moment, that one idea just ignited me in a way I had never been ignited before. And what I discovered as an essential truth is that when people do things, when ordinary people do things that are extraordinary, and when organizations perform at a very high level over time, three things are always present that you've heard me talk about. I call it being passion-powered, vision-guided, and action-oriented. So I thought I had discovered something revolutionary, but it's actually the perennial wisdom. It's aligning body, mind, and spirit. So then being in the Olympic Village, seeing people of every race and religion from countries at war with each other, and we lived in peace. My essential truth became, we can make it as a planet and a species when we take what these Olympians are and know and make it available to the world. And that notion that I would love to call the Olympic peace team, there's me being bold, but the Olympic Committee will come after me with all their lawyers. So I call it the Olympian peace team, basically says we can align passion, vision, and action. We have everything we need to speed shift to world peace. So I want to begin by asking all of you right now, if you've got something you can write with or a place you can make a note, I want you to actually answer the question. In terms of passion, vision, action, if we've got 8 billion people on the planet, how many of them do you think really care about peace? And would really love to live in a world at peace and pass that on to their children and grandchildren? Write it down. How many of the 8 billion people do you think actually would really want to live in a world at peace and pass that along? So I'm going to pick a number. Let's just say there's only 7 billion. There's a billion of them that don't want that. And the third part of the passion, vision, action, my question is, how many of them do you think would be willing to do something different if they knew what to do and believed it would make a difference? Write it down. How many of those 8 billion people that you think care about peace would be willing to do something different if they knew what to do and believed it would make a difference? That's exactly why this program is important, because peace is a secret. The existence of peace, the history of peace, the status of peace, where it exists, why it exists, the strategies for how to move it from not to existing in all 8 of those domains, all of that exists. And that's why I'm forever grateful to Willis Harman. And George, I'm so glad that you're here because, you know, Willis said that global mind change is the fastest way to world peace. And Avon Madison with Pathways to Peace created 3 tools, one day declared by the United Nations, where we can all look in the same direction at peace and be inspired, informed, and engaged. Right? And then for me, bringing my contribution, which was Olympians as messengers, that we can make it. We can make it as a planet and a species. And what you think matters. What you think matters. So my bold step is I also want to start adding, don't be ignorant. So today I'm really delighted that we've got George Orbelian with us. And that he comes from not comes from, but part of who he is, brings forward Bucky Fuller's work, Buckminster Fuller. And that also today we're focused on the environment. And, you know, I have sitting right next to me, one of those places where don't be ignorant sits right in our face. Drawdown, the subtitle, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. So, George, I look forward to our conversation today because we're on the brink of systemic change. And when peace is no longer a secret, and we can bring these things together, you know, what Bucky said that has to do with our greatest asset. I wish I had his quote, but had to do with it's about mobilizing and aligning the people. We have never had the ability to do it the way we do today. So I'm going to ask Tom if you would introduce George for us today. I'm excited about our conversation, as if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn, and welcome, George. It's great to have you with us today. And I'd like to start the conversation with you and today's program with just an observation. You know, in the conversations you and I've had over the years, my observation of you as a human being is a life well lived. You've had an extraordinary life in terms of following your passions, your interests, your learning. And I'd love for you to share with our audience, who is George and what has motivated you? What's driven you to live the life that you've lived?
Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for sharing this time together. So actually, I'm a product of war and love. So my parents were both torn out of their homelands. My mom was from the Ukraine. My dad was from Armenia. They met in a displaced persons camp in Hamburg, Germany. My mom had been a doctor in the Ukraine and worked on wounded soldiers during the war, found herself in Poland, had a relationship, had a daughter. And my dad had been part of a wealthy family in Armenia in the oil fields. And his dad was high up in politics, his mother as well. My grandfather, who I never met, was murdered by Stalin. My dad found himself thrown out in the street when he was 14 with his 7-year-old brother as his mother was taken away to prison and ended up in the war, was exploded in a tank and unconscious. Other 2 guys he was with were dead. And so that's how they ended up in Hamburg. They went through Ellis Island. My dad didn't like New York. He went to San Francisco. He was Armenian, connected another Armenian family, and got a job as a janitor at Gump's, which was like a museum where you could buy things. Richard Gump, the owner, was down in the basement, saw my dad, and said, "Were you in World War II?" My dad said, "Yes." he said, will you come to my house for dinner? I want to know what it was really like. And my dad went, they became lifelong friends. Richard was asked to be my godfather, which he agreed to. So at my christening, hula dancers came. So imagine that, hula dancers coming from Hawaii to dance at my christening. At 11 years old, I'm invited by Richard to go to his house in Moorea, Tahiti, which today is the Gump Research Station for coral reefs. So we always had people coming through our house. People would visit. Back then, my parents would get the Russian newspaper and Pravda. And one day my mom saw an ad for my dad's brother. They thought he was dead. They didn't know what happened to each other. My dad figured out that his brother, my uncle, was alive. He figured out his mother was alive. He was friends with Mayor George Christopher. Because, everyone prominent shopped at Gump's, right? So he's connected to the entire elite of San Francisco. George Christopher negotiates with Khrushchev to let my grandmother visit. He said to Khrushchev, what will happen to the great Soviet Union if the little old lady leaves to visit her son? So he came. He let her come. She came. One of the first visitors from behind the Iron Curtain. Mm. And then while he was here, Khrushchev's granddaughter is born. So my dad finds out. My dad worked in intelligence as well. And my dad finds out and calls George Christopher and says, George, we need to go and give Khrushchev a congratulations. It's like 10:30 at night. And they get flowers and they go knock on his hotel room door with the security and everything. And Khrushchev comes to the door in his night clothes, his pajamas. And they congratulate him on the birth of his granddaughter. And he's surprised. And my dad is fluent in Russian, and he hears Khrushchev yelling to his people, how come American intelligence knows I have a granddaughter before I do? So my dad managed Gump's for close to 30 years. He was the last of the old guard to go, and within 2 days, he was managing the international department for the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. And then Harry Orbelian was unleashed on the world. So he went to hundreds of meetings all over, worked with the mayors, all different administrations here in San Francisco as part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Worked with the presidents, of course. And so we always had peace in our house. And my dad, when I spoke to him about it, I worked very closely with him. I remember him saying, if people are doing business together, they're less likely to blow each other up. That was his path to peace, is showing what is possible if we cooperate instead of have conflict. And then, inevitably, I got into the work of Buckminster Fuller. But just two things about myself is I've always been a mechanic. I've always liked to understand how things work. I took apart anything and put it back together. I love nature. We had a large vacant lot where I grew up at 2127 12th Avenue in Golden Gate Heights area of San Francisco. And I could walk out the back gate and there was at least about 8 square acres back there that was just undeveloped. I'd go and find lizards and snakes and gophers and salamanders and stuff. And then I always, loved speed. As soon as I got on a bicycle, I lived in a very hilly area, and I rode the steepest hills as fast as I could, and that turned into riding motorcycles and racing them and building them. I still ride. I was just in Arizona. I have a 2020 R1M, which is 1,000cc fastest bike Yamaha makes. So I ride at speed, go 150 miles an hour on the straights. And I got into surfing, and I came to it from riding motorcycles and building engines and stuff. So I got good enough to where I could feel the difference between the various types of boards. And I asked questions on how come they work differently. And no one could give me a straight answer except for a guy named Bob Wise, who I worked for at Wise Surfboards in San Francisco. And his dad Fred Wise was a ship's carpenter. And so they made templates when they built boards. And I got into precision measurement through Bob and wrote a book called Essential Surfing on surfboard design, because wanted people to get the best boards they could and help them understand the relationship between design features and surfboard performance and their own development as surfers. And then really got into surfing and the ocean and how waves work and big waves, and surfed the biggest waves in San Francisco, which we get huge waves. A lot of people don't realize that we get some large, in the 20-30 foot range. Was invited by Surfer Magazine to be the person that would answer questions about surfboard design. So they, in reviewing my book, they liked it, and they said, "Will you do this question and answer column?" I go, "Well, before you get into answering questions, you got to talk about surfboards in an intelligent way," which you guys failed to do. So we have to revamp the whole way you do it. So I became the Surfboard Design Editor, and I made sure that key issues about surfboard design were put into the book. Into the way we spoke, because everyone was starting to travel around the world to surf. So you had guys in South Africa going to Hawaii. They needed to know what they needed for equipment, right? How much curve the board had in the bottom, the width, the length, and so forth for the unique waves in different areas. So did that, met George Downing, who was a legendary big wave rider who the big wave rider community calls the teacher. He was the contest director for the Quiksilver in memory of Eddie Aikau. I think people who have been to Hawaii often see a bumper sticker that says Eddie would go. And that refers to Eddie Aikau, who was the first big wave lifeguard on the North Shore of Oahu. Legendary big wave rider, part of the Aikau family. And he was on the Hokulea when it capsized. Hokulea was a Polynesian voyaging society canoe that was replicated to help do the migration voyages. And it capsized on its way out from Oahu. And Eddie would ask the skipper, Nainoa Thompson, he goes, "Let me paddle for help," because they had no aids on it. They had no modern equipment. And finally, Nainoa agreed, because you're never supposed to leave the wreckage, right? And everyone thought, well, if anyone could do it, Eddie can. So he grabbed his board and he took off. He was never seen again. No trace, no board, no Eddie. Largest air-sea rescue effort in the history of the Hawaiian Islands. So anyway, legendary spirit. And we would have the event every year. The main event was bringing together the global team of surfers and the global tribe, and paddling into a circle at Waimea Bay and holding hands in the water in Eddie's honor, and in the honor of life, and in the honor of the Hawaiian people. So that's me.
Geez, George. Are you connected to the environment, you think?
Yeah, I feel it.
Well,
So, you know, I'm honored to be here, and really this idea of peace, I think it's important also to ask, let's think about what would ever inspire anyone to go to war, right? It's to me, it's shocking. When you work with nature, I mean, there's nothing but flow. Nature is always cooperating. There aren't any conflicts in nature. Nature just does. It just does it. And if it works, it keeps going in that direction. If it doesn't work, it stops and it goes a different way. And we've got on this planet, I don't know, is it less than 10,000 people total that are making the decisions to put us into war? 10,000 out of 8 billion? Let's do the math here. What we really have, you know, think about it. When you're born, you come out of the birth canal and you go to your mother's breast and you make eye contact with your mother. You see her, and right then you know there's another human being that is key to your life. That's ingrained in us. And, you know, Bucky even talks about the fact that, you know, that the human being comes with a mother who has the breasts to feed the human being. Humanity has come to this planet with the earth, which is the breast from which we can suckle and live. All indigenous people know this. You know, the water is clean, the air is clean, the soil is full of life, the plants, all the different kinds. Food pyramid, we don't need no food pyramid. The whole planet is food. Our chakras, they're made to directly download the energies of this planet. We are solar powered. The food we eat, whether we're eating plants or we're eating the animals that ate the plants or the fish that ate the plants, those carbohydrate chains that are put together by the sunlight in our ultimate digestion are unsnapped, the solar power is released, and that's what we live on. We are solar powered beings. We are light beings. Everyone on this call and everyone you see from this moment on, realize it is a god you're looking at, or a goddess with unlimited potential. They've had a cap on this. No one wants smart sheep if they're a sheep herder, right? They want to be able to keep you fenced in. As you grow up, has anyone ever sat you down and said, you know, you've learned enough? It's time for you to share your unique gifts with the world. Your unique stardust pattern integrity, as Bucky would call it. So I mentioned Bucky, and let's just take a minute to honor this guy. Buckminster Fuller, Richard Buckminster Fuller, born 1895. Radio is just coming up, as he's growing up, and he sees his parents talking about, what they heard on the radio. They're sitting around watching the radio together as a family. And then there's a moment where Bucky says, I saw them, telling me what they heard on the radio. So I just go direct. I just start doing what the radio tells me direct. So this guy's got a rich life. He's got, a lot of great people in his circle, but he's got some issues with his eyesight. When he's a young kid, he's in school. The teacher gives the toothpicks and peas to all the students and says, hey, plug this together however you want. Everyone else is doing little cubes. Bucky's doing a tetrahedron. He's doing a three-sided pyramid because he doesn't see so well. So he does things by feel. And if it doesn't feel right, it's not strong. And so here's a structure he could make that's stable in every way, every direction he put it. It didn't rack like a cube would with peas, where it could lean and fall over. So Bucky's teacher pulls in other teachers from the school and says, hey, look what little Bucky did here, So that started it. But he was also a very inquisitive mind. Had some time in the Navy. Was thrown out of Harvard a couple of times. He was a free thinker, obviously. And when you go to the archives at Stanford, which I was just in a few days ago, and you start going through his 1,400 lineal feet of boxes at Stanford, which you're welcome to visit and go through and touch Bucky's papers yourself. You just see that this guy is completely other level. So he creates the Dymaxion map. The Dymaxion map is the first map in the history of humans that accurately depicts land and sea mass. What does he do with that map? He blows it up to the size of a basketball court, and he has students stand on it in the proximities of population on the planet with little tags in their hands showing the resources that they would then trade with the objective of make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. That's a Bucky quote.
Yep.
And, he knew in the 60s, he probably knew right shortly after being born, that, peace was, the way that humans could make the world go from scarcity to abundance.
Yes.
He talked about going from weaponry to livingry. He accurately identified war as a tool of politics. And he said that, we need to shift the highest capacities of humanity from this fear of scarcity to this alignment with and flow with abundance.
Yes.
So the way I ended up on the board of the Buckminster Fuller Institute is I was visiting Peter Eisenberger at his think tank up in Elk, California on the North Coast with a bunch of other folks. And one of the guys walking next to me was a guy named David McConville, he and his wife or partner, Don Danby, have a studio called Spherical. And we're walking through the redwoods, and I mentioned something about Bucky, and then he mentioned something about Bucky, and I just said, oh boy, I better just be quiet and listen, because this guy knows a ton about Bucky. And as we got to talking, I said, you know a lot about Bucky. And he said, I should. I'm the executive director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. So we had a great time talking. And then after a few days, he calls me up on the phone. He goes, George, would you be on the board? The Buckminster Fuller Institute. And I was kind of going, wow, what an honor. Yeah, of course. So I meet Allegra, Bucky's daughter, and Lucinda, his niece, and I'm accepted onto the board. And as I get on the board, I meet, there's a large group, and I meet them, and we have a lot of meetings, and we're getting going. And the organization had just come off a time period of doing the Buckminster Fuller Challenge. And the Arnault family had funded the challenge, which was a 10-year annual prize. So from 2007 to 2017, where the top innovators in the world that were working on Buckminster Fuller's ideas and inspirations were awarded a $100,000 prize and recognition for their work on behalf of the planet. And we had just finished that. We were in transition. And I had seen a guy named Tom Chi on a TED Talk. And I watched this video called Everything is Connected. And I go, man, it'd be cool if I could meet that person sometime. And so as we were doing the restructuring, there's a point where the old board kind of left, and we were wondering what we were going to do with the future of the organization. And David had been friends with Tom, and Tom ends up walking into the room to be the head of BFI. And I just go, oh man, the power of suggestion, or, alignment, or,
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so we've been working together for years. And then Tom very soon brought in Barbara Mers, who, is a Stanford alum in law and Fulbright scholar working with the Maoris, and, was the strategist to help the Nature Conservancy raise $8 billion, and worked with Pathfinder, and just, it's just a powerhouse. And, we know, there's no question, this is a turning point for humanity. I ride motorcycles at high speeds. There's a million things you can look at. When you're coming into a corner at 150 miles an hour, there's a couple things you have to look at. If you were on a bus with everyone you loved on that bus, and the driver was on a curvy road, and he kept going closer and closer to the edge, at what point would you walk up to the driver and say, stop this bus, get out of the driver's seat, you're not qualified, you're going to kill us all? That's the moment we're in right now. That's the moment we're in right now. So it's not an option to be, live, and think anything but harmony and flow with the natural environment and with each other. Because the power is in the love and the light. It's expansive. Bucky called love metaphysical gravity. I mean, think about it, metaphysical gravity.
Yeah.
Not radiation goes out, gravity pulls everything in. Radiation, you can beam a radiation, a beam of light, you can beam into any direction you want. You can control it. Try to control gravity. You can't. You got to work with it. And humans, in this little article that Bucky did called Dare to Be Naive, he talks about how a child understands gravity. They roll over, they fall, they crawl, they raise their head up and it drops, they build their muscles. All of these things are inherent in, we're here as unique sensory influencers on the planet, the epitome of life and consciousness. We're here as the caregivers of the planet and each other. We are part of nature. We are nature. We are one of the sensory filaments with the ability to direct what happens to this planet. We co-create reality. Our thoughts are matter. We are gods. Take responsibility for that. Own that. Yes. You are now officially a god. You are responsible. The higher you are in evolution, the more responsibility you have for all the life that doesn't have a voice.
Yeah, picking up on that comment, George, you mentioned it earlier about about nature, and just in your closing remarks there, you talk about we are part of nature, but humanity has worked really hard to have dominance over nature and to separate ourselves from nature, and yet we are innately part of nature. And there's I'll call it a deliberate or a willful ignorance about our relationship with nature. And it's getting in the way of our ability to recognize that most of us live in some semblance of peace every day. And we continue to destroy this very planet that enables us to survive. And I'm wondering if you can speak to some of that.
Well, the first thing I want to say is this isn't by accident. Nothing, no life on this planet ecocides itself. Nothing kills itself. We are life. We know how to do this. The indigenous people took care of this planet for thousands of years, lived without leaving a trace. You know, we separate everything, created silos, we created schools. I was with some friends that were part of the indigenous community, and they were saying how they had asked an indigenous grandmother, you know, what is tradition? She said, tradition is what works. What is sacred? Sacred is connection, she said. You know, when you are connected in, there was another friend, you know, we were having a conversation about AI. Said, indigenous fellow said, we don't need AI. We are AI. We are the intelligence. We know that we are. So this whole thing about, oh, this is the best we can do, and you know, we got to pollute and all this. And humans invented waste. Nature has no waste. I did a nonprofit to go after the plastic in the North Pacific Gyre in 2009, Project Kaisei, because you know, Captain Charles Moore sounded this big alarm. Oh, there's an island of plastic the size of Texas, or twice the size of Texas in the North Pacific. And I said, how can that be? How can we take something that, you know, so many people love the ocean, right? How can we destroy the ocean? And when I was growing up, we had the first oil spills, you know, the oil slicks and the birds that were covered with oil. Just a tragedy. So yeah, we're part of nature, and we better realize that and fix it, because you know, when you see everything around you dropping off due to ecocide, when you see the parasites and the fungi, you know, taking over the rotting processes and getting into us humans, our health for the most part is a reflection of the state of nature. When you look at aging, aging is rotting. Aging is rotting. What we have done is we have gone to the oldest living beings on this planet, the old growth forests, and we've cut them down. Those systems, imagine the canopies that grew with those trees blocking the sunlight, the direct sunlight of those very delicate microorganisms on the forest floors. Now they've been cut. 95% of the redwoods in the Northwest cut down. 2% protected, 3% still in private hands that are vulnerable. So those ecosystems get the sunlight, and all of a sudden sunlight's hitting those delicate organisms that are disengaged from the life source of the trees. The trees are antennas bringing the energy of cosmos and earth and together and feeding that life force into the soil. When there's a fire, the mycelium networks speak to each other and move moisture into the areas to help recovery. That's why the indigenous people practiced burns and so forth. When the Amazon would burn, they would replant the medicinal plants. Water, the spring water, very important. Not some kind of chemical soup that they feed you because they don't know any better, because they're looking at one limited aspect of the spectrum of what water really is. Water it's liquid love, really. That's what water is. And we run on love and light. So, that's an important thing. I would suggest, and this is, I practice this, is every day get your bare feet on the soil. Breathe through your nose, because when you breathe through your nose, the nose was made for breathing, you release nitrous oxide in your sinuses. That nitrous oxide is a vasodilator. So it dilates your blood vessels so more of the oxygen goes into your system. Think about it. When you get scared, what do? You gasp. The minute you open your mouth and you breathe through your mouth, you're telling your adrenals, pop off, it's fight or flight time. If you get cut, we're putting in adrenaline, which is a vasoconstrictor, which will keep you from bleeding as much if you get cut. So breathe through your nose, barefoot on the soil, drink spring water. Find out where there's a spring near you. Go get the spring water, protect the spring water, look at the source of the spring water, check what's in the spring water, and then realize that the destruction to our food systems and the manipulation of what we think we need to be on this planet and how we should live and how we should interact with each other in the environment. Rethink all of the things that don't work and really trust your body as a tuning fork of reality. Buckminster Fuller said, every child is born a genius, and we de-genius them in the way we bring them up. That's right. He said when the child is crawling around and putting things in their mouth and breaking things and stuff, they're recalibrating their brain to connect to what's going on what they see and what they feel. Imagine that. You're programming yourself through your experience. We're totally experiential beings. Our senses are only working on a fragment, on a sliver of what's happening in reality. We see part of the light spectrum. We hear part of the sound spectrum. We taste part of what is actually going on. We smell part of it. 70% of species on this planet, their main communication is through smell. When a dog goes up and smells another dog, they know what the state of that dog is. They know what it ate. They know how stressed it is. All of that is dialed in. How we smell, what the sounds are. We're getting programmed to think that, oh well, put on a sleep mask, cut out the lights that are in your way of sleeping. You know, put something on your ears to cancel the noise out. You know, but just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. Doesn't mean it's not affecting you, right? Go spend time in nature where you can't hear anything from the outside, and tune in, and you'll. That's where peace is, right? When I go into the ocean, I grew up in San Francisco is not really a known surf spot, so I surfed a lot on my own, and I got to surf all over the world, spent a lot of great time in the water, but I never liked surfing with other people in the water. I grew up surfing alone, with just one or two guys, and you never knew, San Francisco is a beach break. You can't paddle around the break and go surfing. You have to paddle through it. So on the bigger days, you wouldn't know if the other person would get out. And so I ended up surfing a lot by myself, and I love that. It's my church. And you can just, you feel there and you're in harmony with it. So, yeah, we're one with nature, and what we think and do matters. And we've got this peace. It's just stop doing war. So war is just, as Bucky said in the 60s, he said, at this point in human history, war is simply murder.
Yeah.
George, I'd like to take the conversation back to the comment you made earlier about being on the bus on a windy, curvy, twisty road, and you're there with all of your friends. Love to get your thoughts on who's driving the bus and what is it going to take for those on the bus to tell the driver to stop?
Well, we're on the bus. It's going to take us, standing together to stop the people that are driving the bus. The people that have been driving the bus have been driving it for a long time. Start looking at the various groups. One place to start is look up a website called Little Sis, littlesis.org. So that's the involuntary Facebook of the 1%. So that'll show you who's working together, which wealthy people are on each other's boards, and perpetuating the dynamics that are going on right now. Look at the history of knowledge on this planet. Knights of Templar, Masons, Club of Rome, all everything where they're kind of thinking through reality. Look at the work of Jimmy Carter, who, my friend Rob Coughlin, who was with the first president of the Surfrider Foundation, worked with Jimmy Carter for 4 years in the White House. And, Jimmy created the Global 2000 report. Can you imagine a president of the United States that actually wanted to know what the future of the world was, 20, 25 years in the future? So, they create the Global 2000 report, which was about 1,400 pages, primarily written by the CIA, that knew what was going to happen based on climatic conditions and the conditions of geopolitical stability and instability. So there are people that have plans and are executing those plans, and we're along for the ride unless we get up and decide we're not. So, there's definitely an action. Doesn't need to be violent, but it needs to be intelligent, and it needs to be in integrity.
So this is where, Tom, how long I have been excited from the place of knowing that the answers are out there, but now we have the ability to make those answers available. And George, I'm just so delighted that you're here and that you're across the bay, and we're going to get to, as we intended when we met last time, to spend more time together. But to Tom's question, about the bus, and yeah, we now can see, who's driving the bus, right? And who's connected to do, and cherchez la money and all of that kind of stuff. So the transparency capability that we have now is a critical success factor. And at the same time, because I happened upon Gene Sharp's work on the history of successful nonviolent revolutions, and he was asked to come and help young people in Myanmar, and he said, I can't do that. I'm old. I don't know enough about it. I will write a book and take everything that I have learned about the history of successful nonviolent revolutions. And the book, Dictatorship to Democracy, is a decision tree. So as you step into it, it's not easy to read because he's a researcher, but he basically, takes you on this decision tree so that if you're in a military dictatorship versus a religiously controlled area versus a place that has freedom of speech, you go down this decision tree and you find out that of these 103 elements that he identified that are present in different successful nonviolent revolutions, you have to put them together in a very systemic way. And so, yes, the largest mobilization of people on the planet after Trump was elected by itself is not sufficient, despite the display of how many people were in the street, and boycotts and all of those. They're all important elements, but they have to be used strategically. So to Tom's question, yeah, we can see who's driving the bus, and we have the answers about, how to remove the bus driver. Successful nonviolent revolutions. So, the answers are all out there, and what you think matters. So I'm very excited to be
here. Here's another element. Think about what single element runs through everything humans are proud of accomplishing. Virtually every single thing we've done has one element running through it. From an Olympic medal to the building of a bridge, to going from the horse and buggy to Formula One cars to self-driving cars, from going to from the Wright brothers canvas and wood bicycle engines, and creating the first aircraft, and then we've got now the James Webb Space Telescope. We've got the different fighter planes, commercial planes, got aeronautics. Everything humans have done has all been connected to precision measurement. We have measured everything. Bucky talked about this guy named Johansen. Johansen created the gauge blocks. The gauge blocks were precision references for the micrometers and the calipers that were required by the Industrial Revolution to make parts that would then be able to be fit in different applications around the world. So you have Henry Ford stepping in to help Johansen mass produce those gauge blocks so that we could standardize measurement and do things consistently wherever they were made. So right now, most of the things we depend on, the cars we drive, the planes we fly, the stairs we step on, the windows, all this has codes and standards. And we depend on something. We know the seat of a toilet's going to be about this high. We know the counter of a kitchen is going to be about this high. We know a refrigerator is going to be about this big. We give ourselves blood tests. Well, now we have the capacity to give the environment a blood test. We can give the ocean a blood test. And we can start measuring these things. And when we measure, then we can keep track and we can improve. When a plane crashes, they go for the black box. They look at the black box and they go, oh, there was an aileron failure, or the rivets in this section of the plane let go, or there was wind shear outside that caused the plane to crash. And then if there's a problem with the design, they ground the fleet until we fix it. They don't let anyone else get on that same plane design and crash again. We simply need to use that same thing we've used successfully in other areas. We need to measure peace. When we measure peace, what does that?
Thank you.
When we measure peace, what does that mean? It means that you're measuring life. You're measuring what are the cascading benefits. How much flow can we create to the entire system when we align the things that work instead of focus on the things that don't?
To my point.
Yeah, and here's another thing. You look at one of the biggest areas where we can make an improvement is insurance. Insurance is based on actuarial data. We now have more information about the planet than we've ever had. We put that into the actuarial data of insurance. You know that in ancient Asia, the emperor paid his caregivers when he was well.
That's right.
If he got sick, he stopped paying. We pay for what we're afraid of. What are you going to get when you pay for something? You're going to get more of it. You're going to get businesses built around what we're afraid of. What do we got right now? We got the war machine. What are we afraid of? We're afraid we're going to get attacked. From who? Why? If we put that same amount of money and effort into peace and making the world work, as Bucky would say, there's no reason for war. What are you fighting about? Why would you have it? Bucky called the nation states blood clots on the planet because why do you have boundaries? It's silly, right? Yeah. You think about putting a boundary on your arm between your wrist and your elbow, tying it off, put a tourniquet on there, and what are you going to do? Your hand's going to go numb, and eventually it'll go gangrenous, and you'll die from the infection. The whole thing will collapse, and that's where we're at right now. So going back to precision measurement, actuarial data, which we have access to right now, drives underwriting criteria, which is in essence code enforcement. And you can't get a loan without insurance. Try to get a loan without insurance. So the big money on this planet is flowing into areas where there's insurance, and the insurance companies are supporting the practices that are damaging the planet. And so now they're damaging their own business and they're damaging humanity. There was a woman named Lucy Pinson who won the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2020. And they were going to build a green power plant. And she realized that they were going to chip a forest that she loved. So she went after the people that were going to do the project. They were pretty sophisticated in their ability to counteract her protests. So then she switched, she pivoted, and she went to the funders of the project. And when the funders found out what their funds were going to do to the environment, they backed out.
Yes.
So, everyone's responsible. You just have to, make sure they know. And now that we know so much about the environment, we can actually measure things and have concrete reasons to make better choices.
Well, I love that you come back to measurement, George, because, as I said at the beginning, I believe that most of the 8 billion of us really care. And that love magnet, who is it? Bandler and Grindler says there's either toward or away from. Well, I believe that we're both. We don't want that, but if that's what we're focused on, so how do we focus on the toward? And so I believe that people will move to action when that desire and love that they have is fully informed, not just about what they're fed every day, about what to fear and to be away from, but to be able to see how to get to what they care about. So for me, this program, the fact that we have Peace Day where we can focus, and there are 3 billion of us now who know about Peace Day, and we can elevate that as a day that will inspire people, inform them, and engage them in systemic change. So that's why at the beginning I said, you know, it's like systemic change is what is capable of happening right now. And so for me, it really is year to year, we can up-level our ability to gather those measures in the 8 sectors of the peace wheel, which are foundational elements. When government looks like this, when the environment looks like this, when education looks like this, and people can be informed about where that has always existed and why it worked, where it's working now, and if you want to help it work better, here's what you can do. So, you know, we don't have to work harder, and we can work smarter now, and we can share that with one another and celebrate one another and be excited to be involved with you, George.
Well, Marilyn, think about coaching. You just said we don't have to work harder. What's a coach do? A coach often is helping you do whatever you want to do easier, right? Not working harder. He's or she are helping you do it easy, so you're not fighting yourself. So that you're, you know, when a pianist is practicing, they have to hold their arm in their hand in a certain position for a long time. Well, you know, they know that if you hold your hand with a certain arch in the wrist and in the finger curves and so forth, you can sustain that practicing for a longer period of time. I'm a master swimmer. I was at a swim race, and there was a guy that was about 85 years old, and he was whooping me in the breaststroke when I started. And I was talking to him after, and I go, he'd been swimming his whole life. And I said, what was the biggest advancement for you being able to you know, swim as well as you do? And he said, you know, the biggest thing was goggles, swim goggles. Our eyes would get too red from the chlorine in the water. We could only stay in so long, but once we got goggles, we could stay for longer, and so we could practice more, and we got better. It was the big thing. You know, runners, you know, Marilyn, from your career, you know, it's finding through relaxation and alignment and body mechanics, you know, how do you do things with the least amount of effort so that you can focus in on what you want to do. When we're on track, you know, and we work with coaches, our focus is if we make a mistake in a corner, the lap starts at the next corner. Otherwise, you think about what the mistake you made, and it damages your ability to ride. You don't ever belittle yourself about what you had done. You expand and congratulate yourself and take joy in what you do well. And you expand what you do well. You improve through taking the skills that you do well and improving them, because obviously that's what you're most aligned with. And that ultimately drags everything up to a new level. So instead of concentrating on the negative, you concentrate on the positive, which really, I think that's the biggest thing we're here to learn on this planet right now, is that we can't have what we've been told what is impossible, right? We can manifest that. Just all we have to do is stop taking other people's opinions about what's possible and listen to our hearts and trust our own feelings. And we'll find, you'll look into the eyes of another person that gets it, and there's an army of us.
Yes.
Right?
We can up level, you know, what you think matters. So don't be ignorant.
Right. And don't be afraid of your own wisdom.
Well, also needing to be able to see each other. Because when I hear people say, oh, people don't care, it's like, that is horseshit. That is just not true. People do care. They're dispirited by what they hear, and they don't know what to do. So we need to be able to see each other. People get up every day and they make a sandwich for their kids. They stop at the stop sign. They obey that little white line on the freeway. They're like doing the best they can, but we can up level through programs like this, where you look through 8 lenses of what it takes and what's present when we live in and we can up level. So I might get really bold and start to call it the Olympic peace team as opposed to Olympian, and let the Olympic Committee come after me.
Yeah, well, you know, there's an Evolutionary Sports Collective, and I'm on that. And Barry Robbins, one of the founders, said, you know, the root of competition is Campari, which means striving together.
Absolutely. When people talk about we have to move from competition to cooperation,
yeah,
they haven't been where I've been.
Yeah. Marilyn, tell us, you know, now we've been going, I've been talking a lot, but you
and
know,
we're close, George, which is really hard.
Well, when you and I first met, instant, right? We looked into each other's eyes and go, oh, okay, here's another friend that gets it. And we're part of a family. The love between us, immediate, just right there. And so we're out there, and everyone on this call, and I'm not talking like some actor on the stage at the Academy Awards, love and all this stuff. I'm saying truly, we appreciate this love that's between us. I think those actors, they also realize that the biggest gifts they got in life is, when they look back, it's based on love. And that's what we have for each other, you know, we are all improved when we help another. Bucky even said, either the world works for everyone or it works for no one. Yeah. He didn't leave anybody out.
That's right.
You know, you look at the work of John Rawls, the theory of justice, and his quote in the beginning of that book, where, you know, it's essential that we have justice that is fair for all. You know, the same thing. So let's look back at how we got here. We had the discovery doctrine, the doctrine of discovery, Dr. Stephen Newcomb. The Pope gave the explorers the rights to take the land, kill the people, and take the wealth of the people they found. So here's, you know, foundational to war. They did that, and they damaged the consciousness and the evolutionary trajectory of those indigenous people. Look up the doctrine of discovery, Dr. Stephen Newcomb. Look up a 4-part HBO series called Exterminate All the Brutes by Raoul Peck, which is the 600-year history of racism on this planet. There's a woman named Nina Jablonski who does the science of skin color. Buckminster Fuller explained that the reason our skin color is different is because we photosynthesize vitamin D. Where our genetics were on the planet is related to the amount of sunlight we get. You get too much vitamin D, no good. You get not enough, no good. So you need the right amount. The skin color is the way we get it. That is the basis of skin color, is how much vitamin D we can absorb from the sun. Now let's look at what we've got really threatening us that not enough people are aware of. Number one is we've got the Fukushima water that's being released into the Pacific Ocean right now. The Pacific Ocean, the oceans of the world are the key to our survival and life on this planet. We're starting to do what's called deep seabed mining. The deep seabeds, the minerals and things at the crust at the bottom of the ocean, and the nodules near the hot water vents are the building blocks of life on this planet. So if we have those building blocks near the hot water vents sending up new materials for regenerating life, and those areas get disturbed, we're damaging the very skin grafts, the very, support systems that life needs to heal itself. Number 3, underwater munitions. International dialogue on underwater munitions. We've been dumping millions of tons of munitions into the oceans of the world and into our lakes and waterways since 1910. Chemical munitions, biological, radioactive, and conventional. TNT is toxic for 5,000 years in the ocean. The casings of those munitions are corroding. Those munitions are leaching out. They're poisoning the fish, and they're poisoning the people that come in contact with them. Vieques, Puerto Rico is an example of a cancer cluster. And so we need to deal with the underwater munitions. Next thing is we have thawing permafrost. We've got life forms that have been frozen away for thousands of years, plus methane releases happening in the frozen tundras that are releasing. The other thing is we've got the Arctic that's melting, and we've now got military posturing by the countries engaged closest to those borders, and we have the pristine life that's now, for the first time the ice is melting, and we're exposing that to light. And we've got the forever.
I'm going to interrupt you here.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to interrupt you because we can continue, and it's very important to identify, are there solutions to any of these problems?
All of them.
Thank you.
Every single one.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is what the driver of the bus, this is the failure, right? They're not seeing the road. And they've got us thinking that, oh, that's the best we can do. We need this. We need to extract every last bit of the, we don't need it.
But if we continue to hammer people with the size and the complexity of the problems such that people feel like they feel impotent, it shuts down the creative parts of the brain that you and I live from because of what we've been exposed to. So for me, programs like this, where we can say, look, lots of ways to measure war and armaments, and we need to measure things that are important. We can also measure peace. Here are 8 lenses you can look through. You can learn about where it's working and what you can do if you care about it working and want to be involved. And because of our communications capability and the way that we can program AI to give us even better solutions, we got this. Right. I get on the phone with people and we got this. I've got a cadre of people when we get off the phone because they can see what I see and they know what I know. And we just go, we got this.
Yeah, and it's becoming more apparent every day. If you look, I'm really lucky in that I get to work with the top people that are doing change on the planet. And I just noticed there was what are the solutions? Here are the solutions. First of all, what are the problems? There's a company called Exponent, EXPONENT. They've been analyzing disasters since the late 60s. They started with the space program. They're now a global firm that works in all kinds of different disasters and testing, from car tests to, bridge collapses, Exxon Valdez, whatever. So that's one area that can give you concrete information about what's going on. Gapminder.org, the work
yes,
of Hans Rosling, showing the data of what's going on the planet. Janine Benes, biomimicry, check her out. Biomimicry 3.8, and Ask Nature, all 3. Janine Benes's brilliant work. John D. Liu. John's amazing. Ecosystem restoration camps. That's 70 such camps around the world, restoring ecosystems. Neil Spackman, restoring the regenerative resources, restoring the halophytic shorelines, salty plants. David Millarch, Milarch, the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, cloning the oldest trees on the planet, going up into the trees, snipping the very shoots of new growth, propagating into in his lab. It's what people said was impossible. He's doing it, bringing that ecosystem wisdom back into the forest so they work. The work of Joseph Cerecedes, Cerecedes, author of Biological Resonance, Thriving in a Radioactive Universe. Who do you hear about talking about how solar flares are affecting us? Hey, they do. They are. We are. Ancient cultures knew about the moon, the sun. They felt and were connected to all these subtle energies that influence us. So, biological resonance, thriving in a radioactive universe. Neil Davies, down at the Gump Research Station for Coral Reefs. Walter Munk, the Walter Munk Foundation for the Oceans, and that's Munk, M-U-N-K. Sylvia Earle and Liz Taylor, Dewar Marine. Sylvia was the brunette that you saw in the National Geographics when you were growing up that were diving into, to the deepest parts of the ocean. The Cousteau family, incredible. The Institution of Oceanographics in Monaco, one of the earliest, Prince Albert, one of the earliest places where they were looking at what was going on in the ocean. David Bloom in Watsonville, California. Bloom, B-L-U-M-E, distillation, author of Alcohol Can Be a Gas. It's an incredible book, a tome, that we had alcohol all over the place. You can run an internal combustion engine on alcohol. Alcohol, the only thing that comes out of the exhaust pipe of an internal combustion engine running on alcohol is CO2 and water. It's a shift from the idea of hydrocarbons to carbohydrates. We can use our farm waste to create alcohol, and we can power. David's got a 14-point, plan for U.S. energy independence. He had a 10-part documentary series that was shut down by the oil companies off of PBS. Buckminster Fuller wrote the foreword to
George,
David Blue's
we can power
book.
the planet with you.
Pardon me?
We can power the planet with you.
With us.
With us. Yeah.
Well, George, I wanted to circle back. You mentioned Dr. Sylvia Earle, and she was on a program a couple of years ago now. And as we were closing out the show, I asked her. I said, Sylvia, what gives you hope? And her response was, "Now we know."
Yes.
We have all of the information. We didn't know, but now we know. And as we're wrapping up today's program, and I'd love all of the solutions you're providing, and I would ask you, what gives you hope?
I've ridden 30-foot surf. I ride at high speeds. I don't go into anything without thinking I'm going to make it. I love when things get complex. I love finding that moment within myself when I recognize what really matters. I'd say what gives me hope is I love the feeling of fearless intimacy. And to do that, you have to trust. And I trust that everyone the universe has brought together on this call is part of the solution. And I honor you and thank you.
Yeah, the imagery as you were talking before about the bus driver and the group of individuals who are driving the bus, the imagery that comes to mind for me is a group of folks standing on the bow of the Titanic, drinking cocktails, listening to a quartet, smoking cigars, chatting with each other, and they know that they're going to be okay. And I'm just wondering how to reconcile that with your knowing, your belief, your trust that we're going to be okay.
You know what? I'd actually like to answer that. You know, George, you can answer, but I would like to answer that because it's the same thing that came up when you asked George, what gives you hope? And for me, because Willis Harmon was such a great mentor and took me under his wings, one of the people who saw the potential of what would happen if we had something, this concept called, you know, the Olympic peace team. And people thought about peace the way people like me thought about our performances. And I was at a program and I just, you know, scooted across the bay because Willis was going to be the featured speaker. And, you know, I knew people would just swarm around him afterwards. And I'm not the type that then, you know, tries to. So I was just sitting in the audience, and the next speaker that came up, there was an empty seat next to me, and Willis came and sat next to me because we had already been, you know, befriended and stuff. And in the middle of what he had talked about, I heard him say that there was no doubt in his mind that we were going to live in peace. And I thought, how can this man, who's this world-renowned futurist, who goes to these places where people are talking about such an elevated and systemic and scary smart place, you know, and he's invited everywhere. What would make, so I asked him, I said, Willis, I heard what you said. What would make you say that there was no doubt in your mind that we were going to live in peace? And I'm waiting for some like elevated perspective of systemic change that most of us don't know about. He took a big breath and he looked at me and he said, ordinary people. And I know that to be true. I believe most people are basically good. They want to live in a world that works. You know, they care deeply, and they'd be willing to do whatever it would take to do what they could do if they believed it would make a difference. And so that we now have the ability for people who care to know not just the problems, but that the solutions that George, you just like spewed out there, like out of a, I don't know what, to grasp onto something that they know will make a difference and to be involved in that. And then that programs like this can show people who the other special teams are who are doing things with governance and the environment and education and, you know, all of this. You know, we got this.
Well, the other thing, Marilyn, is, you know, when you compete as an Olympian, you know, you have clear objectives. What are you trying to do? Doing pole vault or, you know, discus throw, or you running a track or whatever. Humans are great when we have an engineering problem. Tom Chi, who I work with, who is one of the great solutionaries on this planet, Tom Chi, CHI, at One Ventures. He's the head of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And, you know, his quote, helping humanity become net positive to nature. He's got businesses in his portfolio. He's running 500 million now. He started his own fund because he was frustrated that their solutions were out there that, you know, weren't being allowed into the marketplace because, you know, he saw the polluters were just keeping everybody in the dark about the effects, the externalities. And you know, think about, you know, I really blame leadership, you know, and I'm not a scapegoat kind of guy, but I built a real estate portfolio with my father, and, you know, I ran 7 buildings. I had 220 units under my management authority, and I had a listed phone number. You could find me in the phone book, when, you know, those that remember what phone books are. And the buck stopped here. And every unit that somebody lived in our buildings, that was my home. And I treated it like my home. And I was responsible if anything went wrong. So I built the building like a racing motorcycle. I didn't wait for it to leak. I was proactive. The roof was fixed ahead of time, the windows, the walls, everything was done ahead of time. So I'd never have an emergency or a failure, right? So think about the planet as just a big real estate complex. We got some water features. They're called the Atlantic and the Pacific. We got some landscaping. We got Mount Everest. We got the Death Valley, the rainforests, and so forth. We got air quality, water quality, food, and we got some tenants on this planet. We got some people here. Some of the tenants are really nice and smart and contribute to the community. Other ones are, they're kind of couch potatoes. They hang out. They don't bother anyone. They got some people that are just like cantankerous and damaging things and so forth. It's just a big real estate management thing. So let's say you leave the planet. Got this planet, you have it's flowing along, and you leave for a couple 100 years and you come back. And you see what's going on now with the wars and the rainforest that took thousands of years to develop, to cut down, and the polluted rivers and so forth. You go, what did you do to my beautiful planet? What did you do here? How could you let this happen? That's where we're at.
Yeah.
It's a leadership. We have to have a plan. No plan is a plan to fail. And we have to have step-by-step measured approaches to how we're going to fix it. People on this call, some of them may have heard of Superfund sites. We had these places where there were damage to the environment left behind with military legacies and so forth that need to be cleaned up. And they were so big and so toxic that we had to call them Superfund sites. So no one's running to buy real estate in the area of a Superfund site, right? And the people that have to live near them are subject to the toxicity, and so they're less productive. They're ill. They're on the welfare system, or they're on getting the medical aid. You clean those up. You restore those, which we can do. You're bringing them back into the living stream of life and health. And then those people don't need health care. They are healthy. They are contributing. The whole thing works. And, we can fix all of these problems, but the basis is nature. The basis is, we can't get away, and we don't want to. I mean, it's beautiful. Biodiversity and the ability of our imaginations, our very consciousness, is one system. When you cut down rainforests, you might as well open up a human head, take some scissors and start clipping away gray matter and flinging it out. Because our imagination is reflected in the life that we're a part of.
Well, George, Marilyn, thank you for a wonderful program today. It was a delight to have you on the program, George.
Thank you.
It's been a really engaging conversation, and I love who you are and how you're showing up in the world. And thanks for bringing that life experience, your journey, and your genius to today's conversation.
Well, I'm a product of all of us, and I'm connected to having a chance to have, just followed the flow of letting go into the abyss, having that fearless intimacy to sense what's possible. And I'm honored to be with all of you, and we've got this. There's no question in my mind.
Thank you. There we go. That's my bottom line. It's like, we can make it. What you think matters, and don't be ignorant.
That's it. Feel empowered. If you're not feeling empowered, that's come to us. We'll support. Yeah,
we got this.
Thank you both. And for our audience, please come back tomorrow. Join us where we're going to finish off the eighth sector of the peace wheel, which is culture and media, and the role that culture and media has to play in helping us understand that we are living in a peaceful world. So thank you all. Delighted to be with you all today, and look forward to tomorrow's conversation.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Love,
George.
light, and flow. Aloha.
Aloha nui loa.
Thank you.
And the entrance to the after chat is in the chat box. And George, we would love to have a conversation with you, with all of us. There could be 50 people show up. Let's see what happens.